Hello and welcome back. In this part of the project, we want to create a cloud-hosted DNS server to complement our on-site DNS server hosted by DC1. What we're going to do is we're going to deploy DNS in a configuration that's called split brain DNS. You think, well, what is that? What is split brain DNS? What it is it's where you divide your audience for DNS into those that are outside your organization and those that are inside your organization. Let's start with what we already have. On DC1 we have DNS running, and if we look at our records, we've got a lot of records. We've got A records and quad A records for all of our hosts. So there's a bunch of those and there's a bunch of those. We have a whole bunch of SRV records needed for Active Directory, lots and lots of those. Later we'll have some CNAMEs, we'll have a bunch of stuff. And basically it kind of tells the story of all of our internal infrastructure. Every host has an entry in our internal DNS. So this would be referred to as our internal, and this would be one half of the split brain. When you look at all that information that's in our internal DNS database, we don't want to expose that to the internet. We don't want to give out that information to anybody that doesn't need it, or the reason being is that it could be used for malicious intent. It could be used against us if we expose the IP addresses and names for all of our hosts and what's our web server, and if we expose all that, then we're laying out too many cards on the table. We create potential vulnerabilities, and it is potential vulnerabilities. The most common way to solve this problem of not exposing all of your internal DNS records out to the public internet is to have two DNS servers. One of them that handles all of your internal requests, and then another one out here in the cloud somewhere that handles all of your external DNS requests. Think, well, what would those be? What would an external request be? Well, let's say that we bring up a web server down here. Let's say that it's www.ak.bobstaco.com. If we want that server available or accessible from the internet, then in our external DNS, we would put an A and a quad A record and an alias for it. And therefore a user out on the internet, if they needed to get to that server, they would type in www.ak.bobstaco.com, and through the normal DNS channels of the internet, going to the top level domain, the root servers, then the top level domain, and then coming down to the bobstaco.com DNS server, which then will forward to the ak.bobstaco.server. That's all of our DNS on the public side of things. When we look at our external server, and actually there's two of them, one of them I'm hosting. So I am hosting an external server on the internet for bobstaco.com. And I'd be happy to show that to you if you're interested. It's currently hosted with an organization called Cloudflare, and it handles all of the DNS for bobstaco.com for the public side of it. Like, for example, when you open a web browser and you type in esxi18.bobstaco.com, that address is that name is turned into an IP address by this DNS server hosted in Cloudflare. Okay. So when we look at the records that we want to make available to the internet, they're typically just a handful. A web server, our mail server, a VPN server, things like that, remote desktop gateway server, just a handful. I mean literally like 6 of them. Where when you, okay, so that's out here. So that's, by the way, that's one server. Let me finish that thought and then I'll come back. The other server that you're going to host is you're going to host a cloud-based DNS server for your assigned domain. In my case, it's ak.bobstaco.com. And on that server, you will then put any records that are needed as the project moves forward, such as if we create a website, then and it's publicly available, then we'll put the IP address and name onto your DNS server. Things like that. The server that you're going to create we're going to create these in Azure. And that's a separate video. I'll walk through how to get to Azure, kind of a little bit of background on Azure, and then I'll walk through. Together we'll create a DNS zone in Azure, and you will create a zone for your assigned, like in my case, AK, whatever your state is for Bob's Taco. Now there's one more piece here, and that's that when you do this in Azure, things are broken initially. In other words, you build that in Azure, but the world doesn't know how to find you until you forward to me your NS records. I'll show you how to do this. There's 4 of them that will be created. You create your zone in Azure. You create a DNS zone under your name. You will then get IP addresses and names for the Azure DNS servers that are hosting your zone. You then need to forward that to me so that I can enter them in here, so that when somebody goes to resolve your name, www.ak.bobstaco.com, you know how that path goes. We've got the root, and then we've got the top level domains, and for us it'd be .com, and then the .com is going to point to this server right here, and then I will configure this server to point to your server, and that's referred to as a delegation. But I can't delegate until you give me your records. They're going to be unique for each of you. So once you create your zone in Azure DNS, those will be identified for you, and then you'll send those to me in an email, and then I'll go into our zone here, and for bobstaco.com, I'll create the delegation to your state. I'll email you back and let you know when it's done, and then your server then will be part of the DNS hierarchy, and then your lookup would look something like this. So over here, a user wants to go to www.ak.bobstaco.com. They put that in their web browser. They type that in. The web browser queries a local DNS server, which says, I don't know. The server then queries the root, says, I don't know, go check .com. .com says, I don't know, but go check bobstaco.com. bobstaco.com says, you're getting close, but I don't have that information. Go check a DNS server in Azure responsible for ak.bobstaco.com. You remember when we taught DNS how we have this hierarchy about DNS servers forwarding onto other DNS servers to get your question answered? That's what we're setting up. Once you register a domain, this part out here is outside of our hands. We don't have any control over the root domain or the top level domains. But when we register a domain, registering a domain gives you a tremendous amount of authority, and it opens up a lot of playing field for you on the internet. You can do a lot once you've registered a domain name. So we don't have any control over the root domains, over top level domains, but when I register bobstaco.com, what I'm paying for $12 a year is I'm paying for a reference put in here that points to my server. And then from there, now it's within my control. So I'm responsible for everything for bobstaco.com and below, which includes all of our state names. And it's the same for you. If you register a domain name, you're responsible for that name, all hosts under that name, and then if you create any child domains below that name, all of that management falls to you. So I've shared a lot with you, and as we move forward, I'm hoping that the pieces will fit together. Kind of the project is kind of all that way. It's where we talk about things, and the idea is that we move your learning forward some, and then you do it some, and that moves it forward some more. And as always, let me know if you have any questions. But this video was just on an overview about split brain DNS and why we're going to go create a DNS server, why you're going to go create a DNS server in Azure, and then what you need to do to allow me to link the parent bobstaco.com DNS server to your server, and then you'll be able to create records on your server then that open up resources within your project to the internet. They make them available to the internet because the names are resolvable. Okay, I'll wrap up this video and we'll then take a look at how to create a DNS zone in Azure.